One way of getting a better understanding of what philosophy is and what we're going to be studying during the semester is by looking at the etymology of the word. Etymology might not be a word that you're familiar with, so let me take you over to Wikipedia and take a look at it. We see etymology here. Etymology is the study of the history of words, their origins, how their form or meaning have changed over time. It should be has, that's a grammatical error. By an extension, the term etymology of a word means the origin of a particular word. And you can read on and see a little bit more about what etymology is all about. But I want to take a look at the etymology of the word philosophy because I think it's going to help get us a good understanding of what academics talk about when they're talking about philosophy. Well, philosophy is derived from two Greek words. The first one is philos, or love of, and the second one is wisdom. So from the word origin, you just assume that philosophy is the love of wisdom. Okay, now this is a little bit helpful. I mean, it has to do with wisdom. Remember in the Bill and Ted clip we saw, they were talking about somebody who was, Socrates was giving us his pearls of wisdom. He was conveying to his students and us through the movie these pearls of wisdom about our lives being like ... whatever it was that he said. Now, there are a lot of people who love wisdom. And for instance, I bet you guys know at least one sports fan. And if you listen to any sports commentator, they certainly love sports and they have a lot of knowledge. They have all the wisdom of the sports. They know stats, etc. If you're into the arts, ballet or something, if you read any critic and theater critic, they love this subject that they're talking about. But that doesn't make it philosophy, although there's an interesting connection between that and philosophy. But where the term really comes from, and where most of us understand and get our meaning for the word, comes from Plato's use of it in his book The Republic. And he talks about there not philosophia, philosophy, but philosophers. And what he says there is philosophers ought to be kings. That is, what was wrong with the governments of his time, he felt, was that they needed philosophers to be kings. And the reason that was the case is because the true philosopher is the lover of wisdom. Plato also had the view, or at least held the view at one point, or expressed it in some of his dialogues, at least in the Republic, that if you know what the good thing is, what the just state looks like, you would just conform to it. That is, anybody who doesn't conform to the right way of doing things lacks knowledge. Or lacks wisdom. So this is why he thought that philosophers ought to be kings. Okay, so there was something about the study of philosophy, he thought, that was going to lead to wisdom. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that it may have been true in ancient Greek that everyone who was a lover of wisdom was called a philosopher. And even today, many people who are supposed to be wise are referred to as philosophers. If you go through the obituary column of the local newspaper, the New York Times, you will every couple of days find an obituary for a person who's died, and they say the person was a great philanthropist, very charitable. He helped out this, he did that, he spent money on this, and philosopher. And they don't mean that he was an academic philosopher, although occasionally, philosophers do die, and their obituaries do appear in the New York Times because the greatest scholars are notable personalities, and if you're a notable personality, you end up with an obituary. When you die, you end up with an obituary in the New York Times. But what it's rather telling us is something about philosophy and where the knowledge, everything that we learn in the academic world, in school, ultimately comes from. In fact, ask yourself the following question. The teachers that you have in college, the professors, have a degree, or many of them, or the degree that the administration certainly would like them to have, is a PhD in their particular subjects. Now, a little bit of a research question. Where does the term PhD come from? What is PhD short for? And I will tell you, PhD is, it's Latin, so it's backwards, that it's a philosophy doctorate, a doctor of philosophy in whatever subject. For example, your math professor might have a degree, a PhD in mathematics, or your biology professor, a PhD in biology, or your criminal justice professor, a PhD in criminal justice. That doesn't mean they are a philosopher, but it tells us something about philosophy that we're about to turn to.